welcome to another edition of the Itinerant Preacher Podcast, the place where you can come to restock on spiritual food and motivation to get you down the road of life. We're in the middle of a series on Modern Day Pharisaism, where we're looking at Jesus' condemnations of the Pharisees and then applying those criticisms to modern day religion. But even more importantly than that, you should compare their attitudes that they were condemned for to yourself and evaluate yourself if you were guilty of any of the same faults. The Pharisees did a lot of things that on the surface looked righteous, but their motivation for doing them was evil to the core. To recap, the Pharisees were a sect of Jews who in Jesus' day had come to be known as the working man's Jew, a group who strictly interpreted the laws of the Torah, those commandments that Moses had brought down from God from Mount Sinai. But starting about 500 BC, during the Second Temple period, and lasting up until the fall of the temple in 70 AD, the Pharisees had collected lots of oral traditions that supposedly came from God directly to Moses as add-on practices and clarifications concerning the law that were passed to him verbally on Mount Sinai. They believed that this oral Torah was equally authoritative to the written commandments, since they believed that they came from God directly. On the other hand, the Sadducees, the other major Jewish religious group during Jesus' day, rejected the oral traditions, and they adhered only to the written Torah. These two groups debated the legitimacy of oral traditions, among other things like the afterlife. To give one such example of how the oral tradition was stricter than the written Torah, let's look at the rules concerning the Sabbath day. The written Torah commanded resting on the Sabbath day and prohibited work. It gave specific examples of prohibited activities, such as gathering wood or starting a fire or engaging in commerce, but it did not define work comprehensively. The oral traditions developed by the Pharisees came along and listed 39 categories of prohibited work and which objects should be carried on the Sabbath. These laws prohibited carrying any object from a private domain to a public domain, in other words, from a house to a street, or from carrying any object more than 6 feet within the public domain. As more time passed, more rules were added to the oral tradition about the size and significance of the object carried. The question came up, for instance, could one carry a key more than 6 feet on a public road, or was that prohibited? Such debates were common. More laws were added as more questions came up, and Pharisees began judging people based on the minutiae of the rules. Jesus condemned them for such attitudes in Matthew 23, verse 23, when he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, the mint, the dill, the cumin, but you've neglected the far more weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel." Not only were the Pharisees making their followers do more than was even required by God, they were also setting up rules that allowed people to evade some basic tenets of the Torah. In Mark chapter 7, the Pharisees are condemning Jesus for not following the traditions of the elders concerning hand washing. They ask him, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" Jesus replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commandments of God and are holding on to human traditions." He then condemned them specifically for neglecting the commands to honor their father and mother by practicing the tradition of Korban. In this tradition, property or money could be designated to God, which restricted its use for other purposes, like taking care of aging parents, for instance. Jesus said, "Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that." What is the effect of all these add-on traditions that go beyond what God has said? It places an undue burden on people that can never be carried. As Jesus put it in the first part of Matthew 23, He said, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them." Does modern day religion do this? I'm not sure it's fair to paint with such a broad brush and say that everybody does it, because I don't think it's necessarily a problem all across the board. And you're going to have to ask yourself about your particular group that you're familiar with or experiences that you have. I've definitely known churches that have an understood, unspoken dress code that focuses more on the external looks than over the internal heart. I've known several groups that condemn certain practices as sinful, even though the Bible makes no mention of such. I've definitely seen certain sins stigmatized as over-the-top sins, with people more harshly condemned or ostracized because they participated in sins like, for instance, homosexuality or having a child out of wedlock. What's the cumulative effect of placing these undue burdens on people's backs? The same thing that happens with burdens that are of the physical kind. People get tired of carrying them around. People become more prone to collapse in getting to their destination because of all the baggage. And then they just quit trying because they know they're going to fail. Deep down, they know that they're being unfairly judged, not just for following the law, but for not conforming to the group expectations. Then they become filled with unnecessary guilt because of their failures. Letting man's standards supersede God's standards leads to hierarchies and cliques within religious circles. Usually the ones who are making and enforcing the rules, in other words, the powerful, are seen as more important, which leads to the poor and the uneducated being marginalized, looked down upon, and left behind. When the powerful are deeming themselves to be the gatekeepers of religiosity and piety, they are in essence replacing God with themselves as judges. The arrogance and the corruption are two reasons that God absolutely abhors this kind of behavior. Christians and Christianity is supposed to be the exact opposite of being burdensome. It's supposed to be freeing. Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Not only will Jesus lighten our burden, but our fellow Christians are supposed to help lighten the load for us as well. Paul says in Galatians 6 to carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So which kind of person are you? The one who helps to lighten the load, or the one who heaps burdens upon others? Do you judge and condemn others instead of offering support, like the Pharisees did to the woman who was caught in adultery? Do you preach love and support and offer thoughts and prayers while never lifting a finger to actually help? Do you add to the burden of others by gossiping or spreading rumors or breaching confidences? Or do you offer love and support, whether it's emotional or monetary or physical? Do you get down in the trenches with others and help when they need it, and give of your time and money to ease their struggle? Do you give your time to lend a listening ear so that they know that someone cares? Those who are in a position of spiritual strength surely remember when you were not strong and you were struggling with spiritual issues. Hearken back to that time and think of what would have encouraged or eased your burdens back then. The Christian journey is difficult enough without having fellow Christians to add rocks to your already weighted backpack. Be the type of person that not only pulls your own weight, but one who helps others along the way. I hope today's message has been motivating to you. If you haven't shared this YouTube channel with your friends, please do so that they too can enjoy another episode of The Itinerant Preacher.